Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. My name is Ashley and I'm an architect in Ontario. And in this video, we're going to be talking about how to become an architect in Canada if you are an international graduate holding a B.Arch or an M.Arch. Or perhaps you are a licensed architect, and I say licensed, so you're practicing for an architect, and you want to become an architect in Canada. Well, in this video, I'm going to be talking about the process to becoming an architect if you are an international graduate holding a bachelor's degree or a master's degree, or if you are a foreign architect. So if you're interested, let's get started. So if you've seen my video on how to become an architect in Ontario, you know that the three main components to becoming an architect in Canada is your education, experience, and examinations. So those are the three key components. Now, of course, depending on the province in which you live and reside, there might be additional requirements such as interviews, admission courses, and so on. So in Canada, there are 11 Canadian Association agencies. So for example, I'm in Ontario, my agency would be OAA. So in OAA, there are, each province has additional requirements. So it's important to follow those requirements. Now in this video, I'm going to get into the specifics to the requirements if you are an international graduate. What is your process versus a foreign architect? So basically you have two options and two scenarios. Option one and scenario one is if you are an architecture student from a foreign architectural program and you may hold a bachelor in architecture or a master's in architecture that is currently not accredited through the CACB, then you would go through this process of getting your education accredited by the CACB. Now, I'm going to go through the exact process and the forms that you need to go through for that particular option. And so in that scenario, you hold a bachelor's or a master's, and I'll be going through that process. So once your education is certified by the CACB, then you're able to begin to become an intern architect. I share how to become an intern architect in the video up here. So once you gain the status of an intern architect, you're able to begin to log your experience. So you're able to collect those hours. And you're also going to need to write the exam. Now, depending in the province in which you reside and in which you work, there might be additional requirements. Like, for example, admission course in Ontario is required. And in BC, there are additional requirements that you have to do an interview. So make sure to check your jurisdiction for the additional requirements. And along with that it's important to know for your exams, you may have two options. You may be able to write the NCARB and the ExAC. So the NCARB is an American-based exam, and the ExAC is a Canadian-based exam. So depending on the province in which you reside and you work, you may only have one option. So you may only be able to write the Canadian-based exam. And I have several videos about how to prepare for the ExAC, so check those out as well. So once your education is certified by the CACB, your experience is collected, you gain the total of 3,750 hours, or is it 3,720 hours? And then you also wrote your exams, then you're able to become a licensed architect. And you're able to then file an application form to become a licensed architect. It's important to note that you cannot call yourself an architect until you get official authorization by your jurisdiction. So you have to fill out a form as well after you're done your requirements. And they will then verify that indeed you've completed the education requirement, you completed your hours, your experience, and if you've also completed the additional requirements required by your jurisdiction and your examination. So once that's verified, then you're able to call yourself an architect. Now, if you're calling yourself an architect, perhaps after you're done writing your exams and your hours are not fully complete, then you may get into trouble with the OAA. So it's important to note that the term architect is used very strictly, and it's important that you need to complete all steps in the process in order to become fully licensed. And if you are interested about how the application process works, which honestly is the easiest process and the easiest step out of all the steps in the process, is the application process. And I share how to do the application on the video here, so check that out as well. So option 2 and scenario 2 is if you are a trained and practiced architect. So in this scenario, your education and your experience would get certified, and that would get compared to the North American system. So I'm going to go through that process, and when I say architect and licensed architect, I mean that you are certified in your country to practice. So if that's the case, then you would go with option 2. And I'm going to go through that process of how you can get your education and experience verified in Canada. And in the end, once you do get that verified, then you are an architect in Canada. So let's get into the details of option 1. So if you are an architecture graduate holding a bachelor's degree or master's degree that is not accredited by the CACB, I'm going to go through the process and the form, so let's look into the process. So here on my screen I have the CACB website, and these are the different modes of certification. So the first one is if your degree is currently accredited through the CACB, then you would go through this form, or if it is accredited through the National Architectural Accreditation Program. So any American schools that are accredited, you would do it through, so the NAAB, then you would go through the accredited degree form. But if you are an international student, or should I say graduate, and you hold a degree that is not currently accredited by the CACB, then you would go through this form here. So it's a degree or diploma not accredited by the CACB. So you're going to click on that. And so here it lists these are the accredited schools, and of course we don't hold that degree. So we're going to scroll down. We're going to scroll down and we're going to go to Foreign Programs Non-USA. And we're going to click on that. And so this is the application for academic certification for foreign programs. And so we're going to scroll down. There's some background information. There are some requirements for registration as well. So depending on where you plan to work and live, there are some requirements. These are the association agencies. So you have British Columbia, Alberta, Ontario, and so on. And so here they list the assessment procedures. Now, depending on your architecture program and your degree, you may have, when they are comparing your degree with the Canadian system or the American system, you might have to do some additional courses. So I have, for example, a colleague and a friend that went through this process to get their education verified, and their education did not quite meet the qualifications, so they had to take some additional courses and some additional courses in order to get certified for their education. And so they would have to complete those courses before getting their education certified. And then there are other colleagues of mine that their education was very similar to the Canadian and the American system, and so they were certified. Their education got certified and it wasn't an issue. And they were able to then become an intern architect and begin the journey of collecting your hours and then doing your examinations. So that's something to keep in mind. And of course, this is up to those reviewing your degrees and the information that you provide to them as well. So here they go through the assessment procedure. So make sure to go through that. And they also provide the submission and what to include, because there might be some supporting documents that you need to do. So for example, you're going to need official transcripts and so on. And it's important to note that your transcripts need to be translated to English. And I know from some of my colleagues that they had to get their transcripts translated to English, and that is a very important element because you want to make sure that the translation's done properly in order for your education to get certified. So getting someone that can translate it as closely as possible to the course information is important. And that might also have an additional cost associated. I've heard that it can be a bit pricey to get your transcripts translated to English. So keep that in mind. And so you'll need your transcripts and so on translated to either English or French and so on. And you'll need your course syllabuses and so on. So make sure to go through that. You'll also need a portfolio of academic design. So you'll need to have that as a submission as well. And you need to, of course, your portfolio is of your academic work. So it's strictly the work you've completed when you were in school. Now, it's important to note that this is not mandatory, but it is recommended. It's strongly recommended. And I would say you should do it. If it is recommended, I definitely would do it because it's an additional document to help get your education certified. And these are the requirements for your portfolio. So make sure to go through all these requirements. I'm not going to go through them into detail, but make sure to read through it. And of course, you also have to pay the fee associated. And it's important to keep in mind that this whole process is a bit costly because you need to get your transcripts translated, and there is also a fee for the application. And that fee is $1,815.34. Now, it is a bit pricey, but it's not too bad. So for example, if you're holding a B Arch and you're thinking about doing your master's, you may not need to do your master's. You can do the process of getting your education currently certified, and then there might be some additional courses that you need to do depending on your assessment of your education. But I think that still will be cheaper than doing your master's. Now, I know a lot of colleagues that go through that process, but I also know colleagues that they end up doing their master's and they don't go through this process of getting their education certified. They hold a bachelor in architecture and they decided not to go through this process and to instead go through an accredited school for their master's. And they've done that because they want to do a master's, and they also see the opportunity to doing the master's to grow and to build up their skills when they are looking for future employment. Now, there's nothing wrong with either option, but it really comes down to the individual and what you want to do, because there's arguments for both. So it really depends on what you want to do. So here we start to go into the applicant information. So you need to provide just some basic information, and then you would get into your education information, and you would start listing the university, the professional degree, any other degrees, and your post-secondary institutions. You would also list the language of instruction. So if your degree was instructed in English, you would indicate that, or if it was instructed in any other language, you would put that in. You would also need to sign your form. There's some further instructions for filling out the next part of the form, which is your general education. So this is where you need to start to list and specify all the courses you've completed. So you need to specify the title, the number of the course, the year you've completed it, and so on, the hours, number of weeks, and so on for each. So you have English, social sciences, and so on. You would also indicate your elective subjects as well. Sorry, this guy... this is general education, so that's one thing to note. And then you would start to indicate your elective subjects. So any additional university courses in any or more of the 6 areas that you specialized in. So any electives and outside of the architecture core courses. Then you would go through kind of area 2, which is the history of architecture and human behavior. So you would list those courses that you've completed, environment, design and graphic communication, technical systems, knowledge of the profession, and so on. And then they also provide a checklist of documents that you need to include. So complete the application form. Was the application form filled out as per the instructions listed on page 6? So they provide a little bit of a checklist just to make it easier for you guys. official transcripts, and so on. And you're going to have to provide some copies of your degrees or degree, and so on. And also the university calendar, and so on. And if you do include your portfolio, you would include that as well. And I think the more information you can give them, the better for them to assess and verify your education. And then they have some conditions and procedures for qualifications, and they list the certification process, the accredited professional degree, and so on. So I would really go into this into detail, go through and read all the information provided. It is helpful, and so this would be the process that you would go through if you do hold a bachelor's degree or a master's degree in architecture from an international school that is not accredited through the CACB or the NAB. Now, it's important to note that everyone has a different journey. There are colleagues of mine that have decided not to go through this process, and they only have a bachelor's degree in the country that they've graduated at, and they've decided that they still want to do their master's degree from the accreditation programs of the CACB or the NAB. So they've gone ahead and they've done that. They decided to take that time to really build up their skills, learn new things, and so on. Or, if school is not your thing, then you would go through this process and getting your education verified. And note, there might be additional courses that you need to do in order to get and complete the verification process. Or perhaps they'll just go through and they'll compare your education with the Canadian system and the American system, and they'll see that it is indeed very closely matched. And so they would verify that. And so once you do get your education verified, then you're able to become an intern architect. And once you are an intern architect, you can complete your internship hours and complete that experience required. And then you're able to also write the exams. And of course, you're then also able to become a licensed architect, and you can apply to become a licensed architect. So that is the process if you are holding an undergrad or a master's degree in architecture. So if you're getting value out of the video, make sure to like the video. Option 2 and scenario 2 is if you are an architect, a practicing architect in the country in which you live. So if you're already an architect, you've gone through the whole certification process in your country, then you could actually transfer and verify your experience and your education. And to do that, you would go through the BEFA program. So, and in that program, it's going to help you to certify your education and your experience. And once you're done that program and certification process, then you are an architect in Canada. There aren't any more requirements after that. They would verify you and you would become an architect. So you're basically transferring your architect's license from one country to the other through this program. So let's get into the details of the program. Here we have the website. And so the program is for broadly experienced foreign architects, BEFA program, and it's an alternative pathway for licensure for foreign licensed architects. And it was developed by the Canadian Architectural Licensing Authorities, CALA, and it's also administered by the Canadian Architectural Certification Board, the CACB. And the program assesses broadly based experience of foreign architects against the Canadian standards. So let's go through the eligibility for the program. So you can apply for certification if you meet the 4 requirements. So there are 4 requirements. So let's go through the 4 requirements. You have been formally educated as an architect and completed an architectural education and degree. So that's number 1. Number 2, you have practiced as a licensed architect / registered architect in a foreign jurisdiction. If registration / licensure was not required to practice as an architect in the jurisdictions of origin, the equivalence of registration / licensure in that or those jurisdictions may be considered. So depending on the country in which you reside, there might be different requirements. I know in some countries, once you finish your education, you need to write an exam, an architect exam, and once you pass that exam, then you're basically licensed and certified, and then you can work and practice as an architect. But some countries might not have that process, so they would evaluate that. The third requirement is you have at least 7 years of post-registration / licensure experience in architecture within the last 12 years. You have obtained at least 6 months of relevant experience in Canada before the assessment of the interview. So part of the certification process is you need to go through an interview, and before you go through that interview, you need to have Canadian experience. You need to have at least 6 months of experience. And that experience must be gained within 3 years before the date scheduled for the interview. Must be gained under the personal supervision and direction of a licensed registered architect in Canada, and must be exposed to the requirements of architecture in Canada. So those are the 4 requirements in order to go through this certification process. So now let's go through the program details. So the following is an overview of the program. So you must go through the eligibility, so you must have the 4 requirements in terms of getting eligible to start the process. And then you need to have a demonstration of competence. And then you need to go through an interview process, and then you're able to get certification, and you're basically an architect. So let's go through each process. First, before we go through each process, let's go through the fees. So of course, there are some application fees that you need to keep in mind. The application fees for the 3 phases, so eligibility, demonstration of competency, interview, and so on, is $6,983.40, and that includes taxes. And they give you a breakdown of what the fees are for each phase. So, for example, in eligibility, that costs $1,222.10, and so on. So these are the fees breakdown. Now let's go into the individual phases. So let's go through, since we already went through eligibility, which is your first phase, your second phase is demonstration of competence. So what exactly does that involve? So you will be required to prove your competencies in 12 categories that illustrate the role of an architect throughout an entire project. The more specific you are with what you upload, the easier it will be for your assessor to recognize your competence in the category. So choose your content wisely. So here they go through the definitions of competencies. So listed below are the 12 categories that will assist you while preparing your documentation to upload for the assessor review. So there's program, and they've also provided some information about that category. There's site and environmental analysis, schematic design for engineering systems, structural, mechanical, electrical, and civil. 5, building cost analysis, code research, design development. 8, construction documents. 9, bidding and contract negotiations. 10, construction phase. 11, management of the project. And 12, professionalism and professional practice. So you would need to complete your competency under those 12 categories. So let's go through the third phase, which is the interview. So the interview is conducted by the same panel of 3 architects that have also evaluated your demonstration of competence in the second phase. And the applicant is required to bring documentation from no fewer than 2 projects as a hard copy format to the interview session. These do not have to be Canadian projects. The panel may request that the applicant bring particular documents. The interview is similar to an oral exam. It is a respectful discussion among colleagues and is intended to provide the assessors an opportunity to further review the submission, obtain all necessary clarifications regarding the applicant's experience and knowledge, and better understand the extent of your familiarity with the areas of practice, regulation of the practice of the profession in Canada. So the interview is more to verify if they need clarification on the second phase of documents that you've provided, it's kind of an opportunity for that as well. So this is basically the interview process. So once you've gone through the 3 phases, then you would get certified and you're basically an architect in Canada. They do also have some resources, so you can go through that. And so if you are looking to apply, you would go through the application button and you would start the online application. So that is the process. And option 2, if you are a foreign architect licensed and practicing, of how you could become an architect in Canada. So I've included some links down below on the program, so make sure to check that out. If you guys got value out of the video, make sure to like the video. And of course, if you want to see more content, make sure to subscribe. And I hope to see you guys on future videos. Until then, bye!